this particular logo with arrows flying into a target. It always meant you were in for something quite special.
Michael Powell is considered by many to be Britain's greatest filmmaker. He's the playful fantasist behind classics, including the Bally spectacular The Red Shoes and the Himalayan spirit versus flesh drama, Black Narcissus. On the 100th anniversary of his birth, in London and at this year's Edinburgh Festival, they're celebrating Powell with major retrospectives. Why is it that the director, whose last major film was made back in 1960, is still so important and so inspiring to today's leading filmmakers?
From what I understand that's been written about why I was interested in them, it says because the characters are darker. So that might be it. You know, there's a darkness in them, and there seems to be I don't know, there's a recklessness about them, and there's a danger about the characters. And you were never sure of where the film was going to go next.
You came to expect a certain kind of thing from Hitchcock. You came to expect, in the later years, these spectacles from David Lean. And Michael's stuff was just so all over the map. And he just seemed to be having more fun than the other guys. He seemed to be, just enjoying what he was doing. And there's always that little wink, there's always that little glint of humor in his stuff.
That's not the way to spell Shakespeare. Who are you, his agent?
You just wish you were on the set. I would have loved to have heard what he was telling people and, the jokes he was cracking. I mean, it just comes through, the joy of the process.
It's amazing just how good the films are and how you can show them to anybody and how people react to them and how they stand up today. I showed a lot of girlfriends and my wife, I Know Where I'm Going. I wouldn't stay with one who didn't like that. That's my favorite.
Michael Powell was a link to the beginning of film. He went into movies in the 1920s, and that's our place in the history of the cinema is embedded in Powell very much.
Oh, I absolutely feel that Michael was a great experimental filmmaker. You can see it over and over again in his films. He's always breaking the mold. He's always trying to find a way to do something differently.
Powell was an extraordinarily successful director. He made over 50 films. And for many people, that creative longevity was due to his unique approach to collaboration. A Matter of Life and Death, starring David Niven, for example, called for incredible special effects, including the construction of a stairway to heaven.
It's the kind of lovely trick. I like to find out how to do it, I used to set people problems like this, How are we going to do this? And of course, everybody had a viewpoint on it.
Beat them! Come back! Beat them! Beat them!
The stairway to heaven had to be all worked out in perspective. It shows what a wonderful art director Alfred Junger was, a German art director who'd been in England for, donkey's years. He worked out all the perspective shots, shooting down the stairs, moving, and shooting up the stairs, moving. And we shot them all in one day, I remember. Because we had the camera up high for the start and did all the shots shooting down. There were all these images going away in perspective, huge, great statues, And then we just went down the bottom, and Alfred's men were already taking down the others and putting up the other ones. Everything was different. The use of color and no color.
That's extraordinary. The use of the black and white negative, the color of the rose, dissolving into the monochrome. This is one of the great moments in movies, They weren't afraid to try it. There's no doubt about it. No, they had a great sense of humor.
The scene of heaven, of the other world itself, that was on stage 4 at Denham, which was, I think, one of the biggest stages in Europe at that time. But although it was so big, Alfred managed to fill it and overfill it, so I had to go out the door to shoot it.
Powell's most important collaborator was screenwriter Emmerich Pressburger. Pressburger was a Hungarian Jewish emigre who'd fled Germany, where he had worked for UFA, the world's biggest film studio at the time. Together, they made more than 20 films.
My whole work in films would have been quite different if I hadn't met Emmerich when I did, which was a beautiful mind I responded to. He didn't have to be Hungarian or English or anything. It was the mind.
They could not work in the same room together, interestingly enough, because they would argue too much. So they decided that was counterproductive. One of them would start the script, Emmerich or Michael, and they would send it to the other, and the other would rewrite and send it back. Finally, they must have gotten in the same room at some point. They loved each other very, very much.
Do we have a go at each other?
Not really, no. We trust time. In a few hours' time, he sees that I was right.
Michael Powell elevated the writer to a true collaborator. There are not many directors who have done that. And for Emmerich, that was great. He had somebody who would direct the scripts he wanted to write.
Because Emmerich asked Michael if they could have a credit that said written, produced, and directed by, Michael admired Emmerich's mind so much that he immediately agreed to that very rare title.
I have never met a person, and now probably I shall never meet a second one, who guessed, not only understood what I was driving at, but guessed already half of it before I said it as Michael. I don't think that that happens very often in one's lifetime, but this is how I felt.
Emmerich had been working on a ballet story called The Red Shoes for 10 years, and Michael embraced it immediately. The film, starring Moira Shearer as the dancer torn apart by her divided loyalties to love and to art, is simply, for many filmmakers, one of the best ever made.
It must have been wonderful to watch. You know, you come out of the war, the whole experience, everything was drab. The movies were in the main black and white, even the good ones. Suddenly they saw this beautiful theatrical colour. Must have been a great experience, actually. I think they're extraordinary achievements. I mean, when you think that the old Technicolor camera was, you know, the size of a Ford Cortina, and to use it with such finesse, I think was quite wonderful.
I'll come up.
Good morning, Mr. Lermontov.
The experience of watching that began to engender in me a great passion for this heightened cinema, this cinema of the artificial. So The Red Shoes became this grand influence on Moulin Rouge. You're taking a very primary plot, you know, the main character struggle between survival and career, then a tragic love with a tragic artist.
Michael, I think, saw right away that this story that Emmerich was proposing gave him a chance to really show how artists work and also examine the very painful issues that you see in the film, which is that when you are passionately devoted to art, your personal life can suffer very terribly.
How he tells that story, it's not just that it's about the theatre, it's not just that it's a backstage drama, it's that the theatrical world of the theatre then becomes the theatrical language of the film.
It's done as if you were the dancer. It's like and what you saw and what you felt in your mind's eye. And as you were making those moves, as you were performing the dance, it's really what they're feeling. But it's images that come into one's mind, like a stream of consciousness of images. And if you could dance like them, that's maybe what you would feel and see. And it's like the spirit of dance itself, the spirit of the muse, of the art form itself, like as if they've channeled the muse in a way, and they try to put it up there on screen in images. That's why the most powerful shot for me is of Moira Shearer's eyes when she's starting to go on stage and she comes up into a giant close-up and she hears the music, and suddenly it's as if the shoes are taking her back and forcing her to throw herself off the balcony onto the train tracks. I mean, it's a grand romantic gesture, there's no doubt about it. But art, is it the shoes? And the shoes, once you put them on, you can't take them off. It's like once you get obsessed with making pictures, it's very, very hard to, you can't get out. If you're really, truly obsessed, you can't get out.
Michael always said to me, art is very selfish. And he said that from his own personal experience, knowing how many times his sons had waited, hoping he would come home to read a book to them, and he never showed up because he was shooting. The terrible toll it takes on all personal relationships. But he knew that in order to create great works of art, you do have to be that selfish. You have to be driven when he said to Alfred Junge, the designer art director who had worked with him for so many years, done such wonderful work, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to have, waves crashing up on the stage and her flying through the air. And Junge said to him, "You want to go too far." And Michael said, "Well, then I can't work with you anymore."
Of course, what made Red Shoes unique was that it was about art and nothing but art, and nothing but art, the best of art, would do.
Powell's visual daring on films like The Red Shoes is matched, for many directors, by his incredible boldness and the kind of characters he created.
All his women are very, very, very strong characters, as strong as the men, as intelligent, as stubborn sometimes. Even when they are wrong in a way which is great. I mean, I know where I'm going as characters of women which are absolutely wonderful.
Who is this charming young lady?
This is Joan Webster, Rebecca, who's going to marry Robert Berlandra.
Sure, I congratulate him.
How do you do?
Put down your things, everybody, anywhere.
I think they are exactly written as if they were men. And very often they seem to express the point of view of the director. I mean, the three characters played by Deborah Kerr in Blimp each time are more lucid, more intelligent, more aware of what's happening than the hero. Not only that, but the love story is full of reality, of sex. You feel that he was a director who was in love with women. The way he films Deborah Kerr in Black Narcissus, you can feel that in the film. The love relationship in The Small Back Room is incredible. The character played by, I think, Kathleen Byron is even stronger than David Farrar, who had a wooden leg. She's fighting against his self-pity.
Why don't you take the thing off? You know that helps.
No. Powell and Pressburger wrote women's characters which were 30 years in advance of the time. I mean, they were really not only unique in the British cinema, absolutely unique.
Over a prolific 50-year career, Powell's influence spread far and wide. Even satirist George Romero, director of cult zombie films like Dawn of the Dead, was inspired by Powell's 1951 opera adaptation, The Tales of Hoffmann.
I was 11 years old, and an aunt and uncle took me to see The Tales of Hoffmann, and it was, I wanted to go see Tarzan or something. And even as a boy, I just fell in love with that movie. Particularly the fantasy elements, the vampiric nature of Juliet and the mechanical doll and tearing the doll apart. It's really a horror story. I mean, it could be a short Stephen King story or something. It's the film that really made me want to make movies, because I had played around with a little 8mm wind-up Bell & Howell camera, and I would mess around with that and just experiment. And I double exposed some film accidentally once, and then I saw that he was using double exposures. And some of the techniques that Michael used made me feel as though I might be able to try doing this. The basic story of Tales of Hoffmann is very simple. I mean, these three tales of unrequited love. And when he plays Coppelius, he's got those big eyebrows, and he's just such a wonderful character. He's like, Igor or something.
Oh, Coppelius is my name. As a friend, I Signor Spallanzani attend. I
love the idea of, a pair of glasses that can make you see things the way they want you to see them. As much as you talk about it, as much as you try to describe it to somebody, there's nothing like watching that film. I mean, it's just, whoa. I didn't know that it was going to be like this. Before the days of videotape, if you wanted to see a film at home, you had to go rent a 16mm projector, and then you had to go rent a print. I would often take out Tales of Hoffmann. And I thought that I was probably the only person taking it out, but every once in a while it would be gone. And the person who had it was Marty Scorsese. And then he would go and get it, and if it wasn't there when he wanted it, he knew that I had it. We never met, but we knew each other's name before we ever became filmmakers ourselves, and we've talked about it several times. I think we were the only two guys, a couple of guys, you know, Brooklyn and the Bronx, going downtown to rent Tales of Hoffman.
The Powell Pressburgers were different. There was something different about them. They had a different sort of spirit. They were surprising, and in a way took a lot of chances with cinema as language. And I think a lot of it had to do with crossing between silent cinema, use of sound, use of color, all this sort of thing.
Taking chances was like breathing for Michael Powell. And as he continued to experiment, Powell was writing the very language of cinema.
They were the first to go to wonderful places like, you know, in Scotland and stuff. But they mixed beautiful scenery of Scotland and wonderful scene like in I Know Where I'm Going, for instance. There's a storm sequence which is fantastically well shot, and yet they would mix that with stuff done in sets at Pinewood or Denham.
The engine's washed out. I got to take it apart.
What can I do?
Keep failing.
Very, very, very few people did what he did, shot where he shot. I mean, you have many exterior shots, many location shots, which are totally unique. You have a feeling that you are discovering the real countryside. I even went on pilgrimage to Scotland because of Michael. I wanted to know where he had shot. I know where I'm going. So I went to Oban, I went to Tobermory. I stayed at the Western Isles. I had a dinner at the same table and Wendy Hiller. When I got to the Western Isle Hotel, I thought that, my God, he had to be brave, because with the tremendous weight of the very heavy equipment at the time, to go from London to Glasgow, Glasgow to Oban, then you have 12 miles to Tobermory. I mean, and you have to carry those lights, those projectors, because the roads are very narrow, and some places where he shot, you have no roads.
Good evening. I'm looking for the house.
But at the same time, by being very local, you are discovering the world.
I just love it. It makes you long to go to the west coast of Scotland. Makes you long to meet a girl like that and a guy like that and spend time for them.
Michael and Emmerich's work had brought them acclaim, as well as Oscar and BAFTA nominations. But after some less well-received films in the 1950s, the partnership came to an end.
We'd run out a bit of ideas, and we'd done a couple of films which were based upon real events. The first one was the Battle of the River Plate, and then we did another one based on a real kidnapping of a German general in Crete, ill-met by moonlight. I just couldn't bring anything interesting to it. I didn't like being tied down to the facts, and so we sort of naturally drifted apart on this. It was just a rather sad mutual gap. You can't have a mutual gap, can you? A sad gap which opened between two loving people.
But Michael's will to create was still overwhelming, and as cinema changed in the 1960s, Powell changed with it.
One of the most amazing things about him is a deep, abiding commitment to human beings, a love of humanity in all shapes and forms. So if he did have someone who was doing evil things, you would always understand him. You would understand his humanity, not just his evil nature. Of course, you see that really brought to fruition in Peeping Tom.
That was when he made it without Pressburger, didn't he? So some restraining influence, some good sense that Pressburger must have spread over the films disappeared. So he sort of let rip in some way. And you're just not used to seeing films from that sort of point of view.
It'll be £2.
It came out of an introduction to Leo Marx, who wrote the original story and the screenplay. I was introduced to him by Danny Angel. He said he's a wonderful code breaker. He'd been a code breaker in the war, Leo Marx. He He's got a marvellous mind. He said, you two ought to get together. You're both funny sort of bastards. And you'll probably get on. And so I did meet him. And after a good deal of talk, he suggested this idea. He said, would you like to make a film about a young man who kills people with his camera? I said, yes, I would. That's exactly right.
There's that extraordinary shot of Powell's son in the middle of it, isn't it? Yes.
Mark, this isn't some sort of a joke, is it?
No, Helen. It's very, very bold, isn't it? And it makes it personal and intimate in some rather extraordinary way. That it was intimate to him, therefore you as an audience are forced to take it seriously and intimately. I think it's a wonderful film. It's such an original idea and so brilliantly executed. Well, I remember it being very frightening, I mean, on a very sort of simple, entertaining level. The man sees himself killing the person. It's the brilliance of the device, the brilliance of the conception, and it's psychologically very substantiable, very modern, very firm, very solid.
The critics couldn't handle the film. They couldn't handle the fact that they were feeling sympathy for the main character who was, in fact, a murderer.
That will do, Mark. Dry your eyes and stop being silly.
Better go. I'd like to understand what I'm shown. What was your father trying to do to you, photographing you at night?
But of course, Michael had no idea that by making the character sympathetic, he would be ending his career.
And the reviewers of the time didn't pull their punches.
It's a long time since a film disgusted me as much as Peeping Tom.
It turns out to be the sickest and filthiest film I remember seeing.
It wallows in the diseased urges of a homicidal pervert.
I think it's clear that Michael wanted to sort of stick it to the critics a little bit by the fact that he included huge chunks of the terrible reviews of Peeping Tom in his autobiography. He did that with some relish. I remember when we were packing them in there, things like this film should be flushed down the toilet, and just astounding reviews.
Peeping Tom was a marvellous look at how the world was going and attitudes to be revealed and secrets and that might be investigated by literature, by cinema, that hadn't touched that sort of thing. Well, he suddenly makes a much more sophisticated film about a killer. It was shocking because it was sort of un-British, wasn't it? It wasn't like people didn't do things like that in Britain. They didn't want to give him a movie after Peeping Tom. They should have wanted to give him more movies. It was weird. You're going too far, Tom. How far can you go? There's no distance you should be confined to.
The money man stopped Peeping Tom from being screened and Powell's career in Britain was finished. He fell on hard times, and it was nearly 2 decades before passionate movie evangelists like Martin Scorsese and Francis Coppola championed his career and resurrected his reputation. Powell even remarried to Martin Scorsese's editor, Thelma Schoonmaker. All this, perhaps, in compensation for that critical trashing.
Michael quickly came to realize, I think, that when you make something that daring and outrageous, you have to expect that possibly you're going to be hurt by it, that people will not understand it for years. And he accepted that. One of the great things about him was that he never became bitter. He never blamed.
After Peeping Tom, yes, it was a bad period. I've gone through it, and a number of friends of mine, where you have a bad period and you never think you're going to come out of it. And you need a lot of support. And it takes a lot of energy to think of doing another film or to do another project. But Michael, I knew every day or every 2 days would talk about another project he'd like to do. And I saw this tenacity he had, which I think is one of the key attributes one should have as a filmmaker, just never give up. And he never did. No matter what he had gone through, there was always the hope of working again. There was always the hope of creating something special, of shooting Beowulf as a silent film. I mean, why not?
And not only did he continue developing his own ideas, but even in his later years, Powell still passionately believed in the importance of artistic freedom and defended the role of the artist in society.
One of the most important things Michael did for us when we were working on Last Temptation of Christ was the film was under severe attack already by Christian fundamentalists in this country. He went down, unbeknownst to me, to talk with the demonstrators outside the theater when the film came out. He went down and just talked with them and tried to reason with them, and I only found about that afterwards. He was in his 80s then. It was a very, very hot day in New York, and I would never have allowed him to go out on that day if I had known.
There is one scene which gives a great and precise definitions of Powell. It's a moment in the Canterbury Tale where the American soldier meet some peasants and they suddenly discover that they are alike. Whatever is their religion, their accent, the country they come from.
Elm. Yeah. Is that how you do it in America?
It's how we do it in my part of America. But we take off the strips when we put the planks away in stock.
Well, so do us.
That's typical of Powell. How the fact that you have an open mind can make a friend out of an enemy. I was looking recently at Black Narcissus, and I was wondering that what lessons of tolerance in this film. The way it looks at another religion. I found suddenly the film incredibly accurate today.
I've never heard him talk. They say he speaks perfect English. Several other European languages, too.
When does he eat or sleep?
No one knows. He's always in his place under the tree. People come miles to see him.
Well, I really don't know what to do.
What would Christ have done?
I think it's very important because we are living in a world where we are facing globalization, fundamentalism, ignorance. And the film of Michael Powell showed that art, the work of art and films, opening your eyes, trying to learn things, can protect you. The fact that it's a success or not a success is less important than the fact that they try.
I just think the thing that I remember always about him is his love of life. The way the light came in the window at the cottage, or walking down the street in New York with him and him saying to me suddenly, why isn't Scorsese's Mean Street seen running somewhere in a theater every day of the year? The way he would engage people, always reaching deeply into them, always making a friendship with them, relishing things like cooking, chopping wood, scything the long grass that he used to let grow long because wild orchids would grow in it. He just relished life, and he lived every damn second of it.
Michael Powell died on February 19th, 1990, and was buried at Avening in Gloucestershire, the church where he and Thelma were married. Though greatly missed, his spirit lives on in the cinema.
That's one of the magic things about making a film. It's a feeling that there is more to it than meets the eye.